Back when I was in school, history was never my strongest class. Be it because the teachers taught me boring stuff or my ADHD didn't allow me to focus, I could never remember any of the facts thrown at me throughout classes. One of the jokes thrown around about me between my friends is that every history exam I took could be considered revisionist history, because I could never get the answers right. In some bizarre way, this leads us to today's topic: Sonic the Hedgehog. No, not just the character. No, not the movie either. No, neither of the comic book series. God, I would have said Sad AM if I talked about the cartoon. No, editing me, you know damn well I'm not talking about. There we go, finally. Yeah, I couldn't make a video about this game without at least one jab about how it shares its name with the Genesis classic, as well as the entire franchise for that matter. Now that the joke is out of the way, I'm going to refer to the game as Sonic 06, since this is how most people know it. Anywho, I'm sure you're all wondering the exact same thing. God, another video about Sonic 06? Is there anything left to say anymore after every Sonic tuber on the planet already talked about it? Be it if they ripped it to shreds or tried to argue it's somehow a misunderstood classic? Well, to be fair, these are valid questions. I've long debated if I should even make this video for this exact reason. Everyone talked about Sonic 06. Everyone knows it. Even if you're not a Sonic fan, you know about Sonic 06. Hell, even my mom knows about Sonic 06. Seriously, she keeps asking me if Silver has made another appearance after this game. It's wild, I tell you. So yeah, I wasn't sure about what I could even say in a Sonic 06 video. Reviewing the game is redundant because everybody did it by this point. Analyzing its story and nothing more, I kinda did it years ago, and while that video could use a redo, it doesn't feel right to do it now. And then it hit me. This game, in more ways than one, revisioned history. We all know that it's a buggy mess which will forever remain a disgusting piss stain on the franchise's legacy. However, when you look at how people perceive Sonic because of this game, be it general audiences, game critics, or the fanbase itself, things become slightly more interesting. Now, I'm not claiming to be doing anything new here. Hell, with my luck, somebody made the exact same points I'm about to make in another video, which was probably uploaded like 5 days before I released this one. But I'm not backing down. This fucking game just turned 20, and as a Sonic fan who wears that title like a badge of honor, if not a name tag, I'm going to be talking about how Sonic 06 revisioned history. Yeah, I know, Sonic 06 is 20 years old. I'm going to enroll myself into an old folks home once this video is over. You're welcome to join me. I'm going to assume that if you're watching this video, you know what Sonic 06 is. It is, by far, the most infamous Sonic game ever made, which almost killed the franchise. It was rushed out the door in order to be on time for Sonic's 15th anniversary. It became legendary for how much a respected franchise fell from grace. Let us not forget that it induced bestiality. Even if you're not a Sonic fan, you've heard some sort of an urban legend about Sonic 06. Only all of them were true in this case. Well, besides the one about the game actually being good, that is an urban legend. Alright, full disclosure, there's nothing wrong with people liking Sonic 06. I may joke about how this game can't be good in any way, but please take everything I say on the matter as what it is. A joke. There is nothing wrong with you if you legitimately enjoy Sonic 06, or any video game for that matter. We all have our own opinions and that's very fair. I'm saying all of this now because, to be frank with you, I like the game too. Okay, like is too strong a word, as it's hard for me to look at this, just this, and call it a legitimately good game. However, gotta admit, I do have some nostalgic memories with it, and I don't load it. I'd play it over Shadow the Hedgehog, honestly. In the 2 decades of experience in this game, that's not getting any easier to say for the record, I've referred to Sonic 06 as a guilty pleasure. It's not good by any stretch of the imagination. but I also can't help but enjoy it for the broken mess of game code that it is. I realize liking something ironically isn't the same as liking it legitimately, but I want to put it out there that I have some good memories with this game. So, as for my experience with Sonic 06, let me take you back to 2005. This was around the time when I started getting into the internet a lot more, which wasn't as big of a thing back then as it is now, if you can imagine. This was before YouTube blew up, so imagine my surprise when I discovered that there are websites dedicated to talking about video games. On a random Saturday in which I was just scrolling through these websites, I suddenly saw that there's a Sonic game set for release on the then upcoming PS3 and at the time new Xbox 360. The videos shown looked pretty, no doubt about it, but as for presentation videos, they didn't really give me anything to sink my teeth into. Then E3 2006 happened, and the trailers which were shown there, let's just say I needed a PS3 and I needed this game like now. It looked incredible. I had a few questions lingering in my mind, like who is this new white hedgehog and why is Eggman looking like this? But that added for the excitement. I needed to know these things. I was, for a lack of a better term, hyped for Sonic 06. I mean, I was a Sonic fan and I was 13. Obviously, I needed this thing pumped into the veins my avatar doesn't have. But due to some delays with the PS3's European launch and having to save up money for it, I didn't get to play the game until the summer of 2007. I was 14 by that point, and also aware of the critical reception the game got. Why did I bother buying the game if I knew it was so poorly received? Because I was 14 and thought a Sonic game couldn't be bad and the reviewers didn't know shit. Hell, I used to think Shadow the Hedgehog was a good game back then. I was an idiot teenager. Judge me. Also, yes, I did play the PS3 version, which is considered to be the worst one. Why? Because I was a PlayStation kid and I wasn't going to jump ship just because of a version of a game might be slightly better. So once I finally got the game, things did feel a bit off. I noticed Sonic was slower than I expected, as well as any other character who wasn't Blaze or Omega, weirdly enough. I ran into a few glitches, but nothing too bad which ruined the game. Besides that one glitch where the bridge in Wave Ocean just didn't load and Sonic fell right through it. I don't know what happened, it never happened to me again in subsequent playthroughs, but I always fear the bitch whenever I boot this game up. Assuming I even do that to begin with. There were some annoying parts to be sure, like the stupid ball puzzle, the Crisis City Mach Speed section, still have nightmares about that one, Shadow's Kingdom Valley, which actually became a PowerPoint presentation for me on my first playthrough. No joke, the game just started lagging and running really slowly, and the only way to fix that problem was turning their whole console off and restarting the game. It was nuts. Speaking of that, Iblis Phase 3 actually soft-blocked me because Iblis wouldn't throw the huge ball of fire at me when he was supposed to, thus making it impossible to beat him before he destroys the platform you're on. I still don't know what happened there, but guess Sonic 06 just keeps on giving. And then for the final story, End of the World is such a bullshit level. It's not that bad when you know what to do, but you're not exactly going to know what to do on your first playthrough now, would you? The load times didn't make it any better, as getting a game over would mean starting from the beginning and, well, you know the drill. At least the final boss was a joke. By the way, first time I beat this game was on June 23rd, 2007, Sonic's 16th anniversary. If that's not ironic, then I don't know what is. I remember being somewhat interested in the story back then. Again, teenage brain, you don't really think these things through. And now it's time for a confession. I actually kinda liked Elise as a love interest for Sonic more than Amy back then. Hear me out! Considering Sonic never really showed any romantic affection towards Amy back then, I just thought Elise fits better because he does show some signs of affection towards her. This is something I regret. I don't agree with this anymore. I was wrong. I was a dumb teenager who needed to be smacked. This is creepy and freaky and yucky, and you get the idea. Also, Alice is the biggest bitch in the franchise's history, but that's no here nor there. But yeah, back then, I liked this game in a legit way. What changed? Well, I grew up. Not just in the sense that as you grow older, your mind starts developing a bit more and you start critically thinking about more things, though that did help. No, what I mean by that is that Sonic 06 taught me something I'm reminding myself every day. In a way, this is one thing I owe this game more than anything. Sonic 06 taught me that you can be critical of something you like and still like it. This may come across as a no shit statement to some of you, but at this age, there was still that mindset that I can't hate this product because it belongs in so and so franchise, which I like. In some weird way, experiencing Sonic 06 and accepting its state as a bad game which is barely functional and frustrating, it made me realize that, yes, I can say something with Sonic's name on it can be bad and still be a fan of Sonic. It doesn't apply to just this franchise either, as it started carrying over to other franchises I liked, celebrities I once looked up to, and even whenever friends did something I didn't agree with. This was the game which, I feel in hindsight, taught me that lesson well, and I'm grateful for that lesson, strangely enough. We all have that one game which is special to us in some weird way, and I guess Sonic 06 is that game for me, as it taught me something important about media analysis and critiquing. I'm allowed to like any franchise, but I'm also allowed to say when said franchise fumbles and loses its way. Again, it's a weird thing to take away from something, but I feel like the thing I took from it helped me get better at analyzing things and also be a better person when it comes to topic outside of video games. Considering I know people now, in my 30s, who still fail to learn that lesson, I'm grateful a bad game from 20 years ago taught me that unintentionally. Also no, it still feels wrong to say this game is 20. I'll summarize that overall, my first experience with Sonic 06 wasn't the worst thing ever. At certain points, I did enjoy myself, even if other parts made me want to break the fucking TV. I learned one lesson about life from it. By the time I got to play it, I finished a very stressful year in school, so it was a nice escape once summer vacation started. And while the glitches were definitely there, discovering the ways in which you can break the game on YouTube and then attempting them for myself and succeeding? That's an awesome core memory for me. Again, it's not a legit point in the game's favor, but I can't deny the fun experiences Sonic 06 did provide me. If I'm going to say the game's bad, I'm also going to bring up the fun memories I have with it. It just seems fair to me. So now that we've gone over my personal experience with Sonic 06, establishing that why I like the game as a guilty pleasure, and appreciating it for something it taught me, I'm well aware that it's not a good game, and I agree with basically everything else that's been said about it in the past 2 decades. It still feels wrong when these words leave my mouth. With my opinion on the game clear and out there, let's jump over to the now. How did Sonic 06 revision history? Believe it or not, Sonic 06 actually revisioned history twice. The first time was once it came out and in the few years following it. How did it revise history? Well, let's go back to 2005 before the Game of the Hour even came out. You know that annoying Sonic's had a rough transition to 3D quote that's almost laughable these days with how many people use it? Yeah, let's actually go over some facts, shall we? Sonic's official debut in 3D was with Sonic Adventure in 1998, 1999 in the rest of the world. While Metacritic scores aren't available, the game has an average score of 87%. That's a high average score which doesn't give me a rough transition to 3D vibes at all. What were people talking about? Granted, you can say these are reviews from back then and that the game has aged since then. That's a fair point. But you could also say that about Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, and these are still considered classics, so Yeah. Continuing on, we have Sonic Adventure 2 with a Metacritic score of 89. There are franchises today which would have killed for their best game to have such a score. Sonic Heroes, if we put my biased love for it aside for a second, is where things are starting to dip a little. The averages for this one change based on whichever version we're talking about, but for the sake of the argument, let's go with the 73 average for the Xbox version, since it's the highest of the four versions. Finally, we have Shadow the Hedgehog, which also has a varying average based on whichever version we're talking about, the highest being the GameCube version with a score of 51. So looking at these four games released before Sonic 06 and their averages, where is that supposed rough transition people have been talking about? Did I miss it? Am I missing anything? Because besides Shadow, all of these scores are perfectly fine, even better than fine. 3 solid scores out of 4 titles doesn't seem like a bad jump to 3D in my eyes, I am sorry to tell you. Again, I'm aware these games have aged, and I understand if some of you don't think they even deserve these rankings, be it now or back then, but once again, other classics have also aged poorly, or not gracefully, and they're still held up to a standard, so what's the difference? Why not knock those off of a pedestal because of it? My point here is that, based on every available outlet that we have, Sonic's transition to 3D was just fine. If 3 out of the 4 mainline games had good to great scores back when they were released, then I refuse to acknowledge it as a rough transition to 3D. Call me biased or a fanboy or whatever the fuck you want, I don't see the problem here. Care to show it to me? I'm not even being sarcastic, I legit want to know what's the problem here. So what does Sonic 06 have to do with all of this? Well, when your franchise gets a game which is Sonic 06, I think it shifted something in the perception of the previous titles. If we ignore the technicalities, as hard as it is to do, Sonic 06 is essentially Sonic Adventure 3. No, I don't give a damn if it's not named that, this is essentially what it is. The fundamentals for it are exactly the same as the adventure games. Multiple stories for each character? Check. Last story segment, which unlocks after all the other stories are completed? All accounted for. Multiple playstyles for each character? You bet. The basic structure for the game is the same as a Sonic Adventure title. No ifs or buts about it. Why does it matter? Well, when you have such a poorly programmed game coming out on the shiny next generation consoles, I think it just made people forget about how well the adventure games were actually received. I can't speak for these people, I can only make assumptions of course, but you have to admit that when looking at the entire picture here, nothing entirely clicks, right? Regardless of how well the games have aged, and I'm well aware that they have aged, calling Sonic's jump to 3D rough is kind of a leap, isn't it? Again, look at these scores. That's not rough. You can't convince me that it is. Looking back at all of this, do you guys understand why I think Sonic 06 kind of rewrote history back when it came out? Suddenly a franchise which did just fine critically is seen as the worst kind of fate to a franchise ever? Just like that? This had to have started somewhere, and these scores, they ain't the cause. Now, the poor quality of a next-gen release, that is the cause for such claims in my eyes. This reminds me of the story of Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness. Remember that one? It was the next-gen release for Tomb Raider at the time, which promised the world and ended up being a rushed and glitchy mess, coupled with some bizarre design choices which made it feel different than the previous games in the series, and it sure as hell ended up being a disaster. Both Angel of Darkness and Sonic 06 did terrible damage to the reputation of their respective franchises. But when you look at the two franchises afterwards, Tomb Raider had a shiny comeback which was seen as the right step forward the series needed, while Sonic had a game which critics shredded and I will still say did so unfairly. However, I'm not here to defend Sonic Unleashed right now, that's for another time. So what happened? Why can one franchise recover from such a slump, while the other was still poorly judged based solely on the one game? Maybe it's just me, but having played both, Sonic 06 is a lot more playable than Angel of Darkness, at least in my eyes. How come we are not starting to say that Tomb Raider was never good? I think I have an idea as to why, but keep in mind this is a theory and nothing else. Following Angel of Darkness, there weren't any other Tomb Raider games until Legends, the grand comeback. We're talking about 3 years in which the franchise remained somewhat dormant. Now, technically, Sonic Unleashed succeeded Sonic 06 as the next mainline Sonic game 2 years later, but the key word here being mainline. Actually, these are 2 words, whatever. While the main Sonic series goes from 06 to Unleashed, there were plenty of spin-offs and side releases in the middle. Secret Rings, the Rivals games, Rush Adventure, the Mario and Sonic Olympic games were also happening back then, there was Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, and Sonic Chronicles. Say what you will about these games, I have my personal favorites and least favorites from that list myself, the general critical response to them was mixed. Not to mention that, as you can see, there were a lot of Sonic releases between 06 and Unleashed, which varied in quality. Hell, Sonic even made it into Smash Bros. In these 2 years, so he was very much in the public eye back then. Call me crazy, but I think that's part of the reason Sonic 06's reception impacted the franchise's perception back in the day. Franchise which had an entry with the same quality, or lack thereof, of Sonic 06 would end up vanishing for a good while. Some come back after a while, like Tomb Raider as I mentioned, and others just fade into obscurity. Hell, some franchises had good releases as their final outing, and they were still forgotten about for years. So I guess that for outsiders looking in, how come Sonic the Hedgehog gets so many games released, spin-off or otherwise, after such a terrible game bearing the same name as the Genesis original came out? To be fair, I can kinda see why that would raise eyebrows. Hell, depending on when this video is out, I either just released or am making a big video where I'm mad at Ubisoft and how they treated Rayman over the years. So I've definitely been on the other side of that conversation. Because how many more glitchy Assassin's Creed games can come out while I am still waiting on Rayman to have a new game? Side note, nothing against Assassin's Creed, but I know that for a while a lot of the games were rushed and glitchy, so I went with it. Please put down the torches. So to sum it up, I think Sonic 06 first rewrote history by not just existing as a terrible video game, but also by being a point where we saw a lot of Sonic around, which added fuel to the fire. If the game had turned out good, I don't think there would have been so much backlash against the franchise as there was back then. Now, of course, I could be wrong, we will never know for sure, but it always felt to me as if that one misstep ended up reshaping the perception of the entire franchise, and honestly, I don't think it's entirely fair, oversaturated franchise or not. We're not going to discredit the entirety of Zelda because of the CDI games, right? Why is this any different? However, you might have heard me say that this was the first time Sonic 06 revisioned history. When was the second time then? Well... in the 2 decades in which this game has existed, still not an easy thing to say for the record, it managed to rewrite history not once, but twice. We've just went over the first time. When the game came out, it damaged Sonic's reputation so badly that people just claimed no game bearing his name was anything good. Review scores from these same people be damned. And it didn't only affect the 3D entries which came before it also affected games which came after 06, such as Unleashed, which I mentioned earlier. However, as I just stated, this was only the first time such a thing had happened. The second time happened relatively recently, actually. Allow me to explain. In 2010, Sega initiated somewhat of a soft reboot for the Sonic franchise. New writers, new voice actors, new tone, you get the idea. When criticism rose against serious stories in the franchise, Sonic Colors addressed that criticism by delivering a simpler and more comedic plot, which brought the franchise back to its roots, so to speak. No more demonic gods, no more world-ending threats, we're back to the basic Sonic vs. Eggman with simple antics in space and humor taking center stage in most of the cutscenes. You could make the argument that this started with Unleashed, as the game had plenty of humor in it too, but the high stakes and urgency were still present. Colors, on the other hand, was mostly comedic, and that tone was kept for the next couple of games. While longtime fans appreciated a breath of fresh air after the melodrama which was Sonic 06, something happened. Something we should have seen coming. The kids who grew up playing Sonic 06, unaware of its reception and not necessarily capable of telling a game's quality, were becoming old enough in order to have legitimate nostalgia for it, and recalling having actual fun times playing it. For the record, there's nothing wrong with it. I myself went out of my way to describe positive experiences I had with the game in order to show that it's completely legitimate and it doesn't discredit you. We all have those guilty pleasures, right? Then again, the term guilty pleasure is where this whole thing begins to change. What even is a guilty pleasure? It's when you know a product isn't necessarily good by any technical terms, but you enjoy it anyway because of nostalgia you have for it, some actually good parts about it, or because you just enjoy making fun of it. Each one is fair, and I showed personal examples for each type of guilty pleasure I have. There's absolutely zero doubt in my mind that Sonic 06 is one of those guilty pleasures for people. Hell, as I probably said earlier, it's one of my guilty pleasures. But now comes the important question. What about the people who enjoy Sonic 06 legitimately, and not as a guilty pleasure? And thus, my dear viewers, Revision 2 has entered the chat. Now, this isn't exclusive to Sonic 06, of course. Type any game name into YouTube and you'll see plenty of videos either defending a badly received game for being ahead of its time, or videos trashing critically acclaimed games because they didn't age well. Both exist, both have been out there. Trust me, I looked. The term hot take is thrown out a lot on the internet, and there's nothing inherently wrong with having a hot take. Again, I have plenty of those myself, trust me. But it also seems to me that the term hot take no longer exists in order to spark a discussion, and more so in order for people to say, "Look at me, I'm opposing the norm and being unique." I know all of this because I was essentially that person at some point. I am not proud of it, for the record, because I realized that by having proper discussions about controversial takes, we can engage in an interesting discussion and get to know people based on those takes. You know how many hot takes I have about stuff my friends love, and how many hot takes they have about stuff I love, and vice versa? It's completely okay to have a hot take. So what the hell does all of this have to do with Sonic 06? Well, to put it bluntly, some people who grew up playing Sonic 06 and enjoying it don't seem to treat their hot take as a way to engage in conversation, but as a bizarre badge of honor. Now, of course not every person who enjoys Sonic 06 legitimately is like this. I'm talking about a vocal minority, obviously. I also say once again that I am not judging anyone who legitimately enjoys the game. I'm just trying to bring up a point of conversation. What is that point? Have you ever noticed that those who grew up with and enjoy Sonic 06 are, for the most part, the same people who say Sonic Colors is the true game which killed the franchise? Who go on and on about how the 2010s were the true Dark Age of Sonic, because Sega distanced themselves from the darker stories and the adventure era? Yeah, not going to cut around the bush, they basically revised history to make it look as if Sonic 06 was a good game which was badly treated by the press. I've seen arguments blaming Sony and Microsoft for rushing Sega to have the game out by a certain point, claiming that Sega wanted the game out for Sonic's 16th anniversary, but fans pressured them to have it out during the 15th anniversary, to some even telling me that this was Sega's way to punish people who pirate their games and not bind them legally. Yes, someone tried arguing that with me, and it was so fucking funny that I just had to bring it up. Seriously, this is hilarious! But let's be serious and logical about this, people. Sony and Microsoft rushed Sega? Why would I do that? I could have maybe see the argument for Sony because Sonic 06 was supposed to be a launch title for the PS3, but that version of the game was delayed and came out 2 months after the 360 version, so that kinda shoots that theory in the head now, doesn't it? The fans rushed Sega to release the game in time for the 15th anniversary? Well, for one, who the fuck celebrates the 16th anniversary of a franchise? Companies would acknowledge it, sure, but not with a big release like this. Also, considering Sega had a whole campaign focusing on this damn anniversary, you can't tell me they planned this big next gen title for the year after. Forget revisionist history. This is revisioning logic as we know it. I don't think I need to tell you that the fighting piracy is the dumbest excuse ever. However, the fans rushed Sega? Seriously? You realize that this is downright illogical, right? To give you an example of how dumb this is, imagine if Spider-Man fans rushed Sony Animation to release Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse right now, because they wanted to see that movie so goddamn badly. Would this animation studio, which is kind of ruling the world as of 2026, just release an unfinished movie with storyboards, incomplete animation, and maybe some voice lines missing because a group of people just really wanted to watch the movie right now at this very instant? You realize how stupid this is, right? So no, the fans didn't rush Sega to have the game out quicker. That didn't happen. There's no way it happened. The industry doesn't work like this. Video games, movies, nothing works like this. But regardless of all of that, it seems to me these days that for some reason, the notion that Sonic 06 was this misunderstood masterpiece is gaining more and more following. Now, in addition to people who grew up liking the game, sharing their genuine love for it, or people just making baseless claims which make no sense, in recent years, one thing contributed to the second history revisioning of Sonic 06. A fan project, if you will. A magnum opus which all of you may have been yelling at me through the screen to mention. That's right, I'm talking about Project 06. Now, to remove any doubt from anyone's mind, Project 06 is fantastic, and I have nothing but praise to give it. Chaos X and those helping him literally fixed one of the most notorious games ever made and transformed it into an incredible game I recommend everyone to try out. This project has nothing but my deepest respect. With all of that said though, this isn't the game which came out 20 years ago. Nope, still not getting any easier to say. Let's get some things clear here. Project 06 is a fan game which is free to play and uses an already existing game as its basis. Sonic 06 is an official release by Sega themselves, which cost people $60, full price at that time, and is a part of the franchise's history now. These aren't the same thing. Project 06 deserves a lot of credit for everything the team behind it did, but it's not the game people spent $60 on all those years ago. If I were to put my copy inside my PS3 right now, all the fixes and changes Chaos X made wouldn't be available to me. You're probably thinking to yourselves, no shit. And if you do think that, then you also shouldn't say that Project 06 makes Sonic 06 good all of the sudden. If the main argument against the game's quality is that years later a passionate group of fans made a better version of it, that doesn't fix the poor state the original game was released in. This fan remake is indeed amazing and shows what a great game Sonic 06 could have been, but it's not Sonic 06. This isn't the game consumers had to buy for full price 20 years ago. I literally feel myself getting older every time I say it. And thus, Sonic 06 revisioned history yet again. At first it was about discrediting anything related to this franchise, while the second time made it appear like a gaming disaster is supposed to be celebrated now. I'd say it's funny how time can change things, but this feels more like a tragedy than a comedy if you ask me. If anything, this change in attitude leads to a very bizarre takeaway. A takeaway which is also self-contradicting. For 20 years, I'm seriously causing myself physical damage every time I say it. Why do I keep doing that? Anyway, for this long, being a Sonic fan felt like you were the laughingstock for someone. When Sonic 06 came out and the first wave of Sonic had a rough transition to 3D started, I remember people were genuinely shocked that this franchise still had a loyal fanbase. Because one bad game is totally going to undo an entire franchise's history, right? But you know what? Sega and Sonic Team realized something might have been wrong since they tried to course correct themselves right after 06. Sonic Unleashed was the start of it, Sonic Colors continued it, and Sonic Generations basically perfected what they started. For a while, 06 seems to be that little bump in the road that Sega needed in order to keep Sonic going, because the franchise did mostly well afterwards. And then Lost World came out, and then Boom happened, and Forces. At least the Boom cartoon was great. Once this new era, which fans called the Meta era, saw these fumbles, people were quick to point out that it was all Colors' fault because it was technically the first in that era. This could be a whole ass debate which we won't get into right now, but it made me realize something. Even before that point in time, there were these arguments that no matter what Sega did in order to satisfy their fans, they wouldn't be able to do that since Sonic fans just didn't like anything. Fans just wanted to play as Sonic, we got Sonic Unleashed. People wanted just the daytime stages of Unleashed, we got Colors. People wanted the 2D games back, we got Sonic the Hedgehog 4. People wanted the classic Sonic back, we got Sonic Generations. People were sick of the boost formula, we got Sonic Lost World. People wanted other playable characters, we got Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. People wanted the darker stories back, we got Sonic Forces. Say what you will about the quality of each game, and believe me, there are definitely things to say about each one. Sega and Sonic Team were trying to appease any criticism thrown at them and tried their best to give you what you wanted. But whenever one side is fed, another side is left hungry. I may have summed up the history of fans wanting something, Sega delivering said something before the fans wanted something else. For the record, nothing wrong with voicing criticisms on something, but think about how this looks to the larger gaming community. Sega is doing their damnedest to satisfy those who complain, with varied results, again, they ain't perfect, but they're still hit with constant bitching from the same people they're trying to appease. That's because the sad truth of the matter is that, like with any other long-running franchise, fanbases can split because they liked something else about the franchise. This isn't exclusive to Sonic the Hedgehog, of course. Just look at all the Zack Snyder fans who will never accept James Gunn's take on Superman, or the people who think only Sam Raimi can make a Spider-Man movie. However, it seems like this whole thing applies to Sonic a lot more than these other franchises. Whenever one side is being fed, the other side gets hungry, or should I say angry, as they start complaining the franchise is furthering itself from what they loved about it. For outsiders, this created the image that Sonic fans are never satisfied. Hell, I made these jokes myself and I am a fan. A fan who tries my best to enjoy every entry for what it is, but given my criticisms if I have any. But it's hard not to acknowledge when this franchise is literally put under a magnifying glass whenever it does something, anything. With all of that being said, if there's one fanbase which is going to the ends of the earth in order to celebrate the franchise they love and do it justice, it's the Sonic fanbase. Be it big audio dramas which had official voice actors reprising their roles just because, convincing a Hollywood studio to change an atrocious-looking design in a theatrical movie, to outright fixing broken games. It's hard for me to say that the fanbase hates Sonic when they do all of these things and more. Why do you think these fans are doing all of that? Because they have a love and passion for the blue hedgehog. Being a Sonic fan isn't easy. I'd be the first to admit it. You could get looks just because you think Sonic's quills look too short. Don't get me started if you prefer one voice actor to the other. I just gave myself flashbacks with that. This fanbase is passionate, creative, supportive, and made wonderful content you rarely get to see in any fandom. It all starts crashing down once opinions on the bloody games enter the picture. And not just the games, could be the shows, the movies, the whatever. Granted, not everyone is so obsessive about varying opinions, but I've seen extremes. And a lot of people saw those extremes because that's how you get memes like this. I've gone on for too long now, haven't I? Isn't this a video about how Sonic 06 revisited history or something? Why, yes, that's what it was supposed to be, and it still is. Because just now, I think I presented the third revision of history this cursed game had pulled on us. Whenever I need to trace back to where this whole divide of the fandom occurred, Sonic 06 always seems to be that point. That game, which did uncontrollable damage to the franchise, almost killing it, also caused that forever disagreement. At least that's how I see it. All of these big fixes Sega tried to do, resulting in more complaints, these started after Sonic 06 came out. Ever notice that? The reputation of Sonic having a bad transition to 3D, making titles people grew up loving seem like terrible outings, Sonic 06's fault. I went over that earlier. Should a Sonic story be fun and lighthearted or dark and serious? These weren't discussions before Sonic 06 came out, we just accepted the stories for what they were. How could Sonic fans hate Sonic so much? Well, they were just critical of 06. A fair game to be critical about. Sonic fans have a hot take, they probably like Sonic 06, because that's the terrible one. If you have a hot take, that means you like it. Someone just mentions Sonic the Hedgehog in any capacity, you get the idea. Sonic 06 just seems to be that punchline, that one thing that's the answer to anything, be it a legit answer or a sarcastic one. How can I say this game is not revising history? Am I overanalyzing it? Maybe, but you can't tell me that this whole thing is a coincidence. That 20 years ow, my back! This game is still somewhat of a punchline at the expense of the franchise, not to mention the fanbase. I can't believe that I'm saying this, but Sonic 06 is kinda special. Think of other game franchises which just died over the years. Remember how Crash Bandicoot just disappeared for almost a decade after Mind Over Mutant? How Metroid Other M put that series into a long hibernation? Need I say anything about Bubsy 3D? Say what you will about the quality of these games, or lack thereof, but look at Sonic. Not only did he not go into a hibernation after such a failure, but he kept going despite that failure and only grew from it. The quality of the games which came after wasn't consistently good, as established, but at the time of this video, with Frontiers, Shadow Generations, and Racing Crossworlds, Sonic is doing better than ever. Not to mention the movies, which definitely helped keep the franchise relevant, and other media like the comics and TV shows. In any other universe, Sonic 06 would have killed the franchise for real. But the fact of the matter is that it didn't. It did rewrite history 3 goddamn times, but neither time really stuck out, I think. Now, regardless if you hate Sonic 06, consider it a guilty pleasure, or you actually enjoy it, keep in mind this video isn't meant to take any opinion away from you. I may have jested before, but that's all it was. A simple jest. I just figured that if I'm going to talk about this game because of this milestone, I might as well try and go at it from a different perspective. Hopefully I didn't make too many enemies. I just hope you listened to what I had to say. Happy 20th anniversary, Sonic 06. Now if you'd excuse me, I'm going to scout for a retirement fund.